Hey guys, what's up? Eddie Aho here with KissAnalog.com. So today we're going to do a rant. And yeah, sometimes I'm told that my rants are a little bit, too nice. Like people expect the rants to have a little vigor and, little angst in them. And this one might, go a little bit higher level just because it just kind of perturbs me a little bit. The kind of BS that's sold in the marketplace. So, okay, this is going to be about why oscilloscopes should not cost that much. Okay, and hey, let me turn on the meter here. All right, so had to get some, stuff here in the background to turn on, right? So I did a review on the KPS, by the way, so that's what's sitting here still. I did a teardown review, and I started a box opening review on this power supply. I'm going to open that up to a under the hood kind of a teardown on this thing too. So they're kind of sitting here on the bench. So anyway, that's why they're sitting here. Now I have my Duval. I can never pronounce that correctly. And but I do love the beer. It's a Belgium. Yeah, it's one of the best Belgian beers, I think, on the market. And yeah, it has a great color. Tulip glass, appropriate glass, by the way. So, all right. So, guys, let's talk about the scopes. Now, here's the thing. I want to, first of all, kind of give a little background. All right, guys, so let me just start off. I did a rant a couple years ago where I talked about multimeters. Why do they cost so much? Why do Flukes cost so much? And I think most of us reasonable people realize that they should not cost so much. And all the reasons Dave gave about a year later are all BS, just to be frank. I mean, we kind of had a friendly back and forth on that. He left a comment saying why they should cost as much. So I responded to that with the video. So it was kind of interesting because, I mean, it was just coincidental. The same day that I posted that, he posted a video just a few hours earlier saying, basically taking his comments and saying why they should cost so much. Which, again, I would call BS on that. And if we wanted to do an actual, an actual debate on that, that'd be fun, me and Dave. But he wouldn't do that because I really feel like he was just trying to be nice to the brand that supports him. I believe they support him. I don't know for sure, but the same company that owns Fluke owns Tektronix, and he gets a nice Tektronix scope for free. And we're going to talk about that in this rant. And he gets things because he's a big channel. Okay. Now, even when I do become bigger, I probably won't get those things because I don't really pull any punches. I don't really owe anybody anything. I've gotten some nice equipment from nice companies like this one right here, Maxim, and I take things that I feel like that are reasonably priced. And honestly, if Tektronix or Keysight reached out and wanted to give me scopes and support my channel, I don't know how I would have behaved. But at this point, after putting in 4 or 5 years on this channel, and they reached out, I'm not going to sell myself for that because I feel like I'm going to have to rely on you guys because I just see too much BS, and that's what this rant's about, okay? So EEV blog is called EEV Blab 101. That was the title of it. Why are Tektronix Oscilloscopes so expensive? He's got like over 100,000 views on that video. It came out like in August of 22, so like just over a year ago, all right? And it's done really well. So he had a Tektronix scope, and he talked about why, gave a bunch of reasons why, and we're going to go over that. And here's the thing, when I did the Fluke one and he came out with his video is so successful. It's one of the most successful videos on his channel. I mean, one of the top 2 or 3, I think. Top 5 for sure. And it did so well. I had mentioned that I wanted to buy a couple of his meters. He sent them to me for free. So thank you, Dave. Really appreciate that. His meters are top notch. I mean, the meters, yeah, so they're top notch. You guys know that. So, and they're far better than all the Flukes, cost 2 or 3 times more. So that's my humble opinion, and I believe it to be true. Now, why should you believe me? Well, I'm a working engineer, design engineer. I've been doing this stuff for many years. I taught at a community college for a few years. Once when I moved around the country, United States, and at one time I knew I was going to be in North Carolina actually for 3 years. So I saw a teaching job, and it turned out to be they didn't have an electronics program. So they're actually trying to look for someone to start one. So I started it. I wrote the curriculum, chose the books for it, got all the test equipment, went out to industry, talked to them, got donations and all that kind of stuff. So I did that for 3 years, and that was a lot of fun. Okay. I learned a lot from that job, but I'm really a design engineer, and I've been working in aerospace mostly in my career, but I've also worked a lot of commercial, medical lasers. So I worked for DirecTV as a contractor, and that's when they were coming out with high definition TV. So I did the power supply design for that. So I did the first power supply design for high definition TV set-top box for DirecTV. And, they sell, at the time, they were selling over 4 million boxes of the standard definition, but for high def, they thought they're projecting like about 250,000. So the first week they were going to build 88,000. So I also designed that same year. I also designed the power supply for their standard box too. But anyway, I've been around, done a lot of things. I've got a few power supplies in space. One in the German side of the International Space Station for medical. I worked on the, anyway. So I've been around, done a lot of things, okay? Worked with a lot of really expensive test equipment, really expensive oscilloscopes, and military defense in the United States, okay? So that's most of my background. All right, so I know a little something about the oscilloscopes and why we use them and all this kind of stuff. Now, here's the thing. One of the things that comes up is calibration. And he brings up, Tektronix has their own calibration lab. You can send stuff to them, and that's one of the good reasons why their scopes should cost so much. That's BS, because most of the companies, I think all the companies I've ever worked for, none of them have ever sent anything to Tektronix. Now, I did personally, my own personal oscilloscope that I bought one time, I did send to them, and they did calibrate it for me, okay? But that's not a reason for it to cost so much. That's kind of a reason not to buy it from them, actually. But anyway, what happens, it used to happen in big companies, aerospace companies, they had their own calibration lab on campus. And then they realized, okay, you know what, we're going to start leasing more equipment instead of buying it. And we're going to have the lease companies give us calibrated equipment. And so then they would, once a year take their equipment, send it off to a calibration lab that they had some contract with. So whether it was Fluke, Tektronix, Agilent, Keysight, Hewlett-Packard, whatever you want to call them, whatever decade you worked in, they'd take all the equipment they used, and, there'd be a guy that'd come to the labs and say, okay, this, that, and this need to go out for calibration this month. And you're like, oh, shoot, we're going to lose it for a week or several weeks sometimes. Now, there were specialized equipment for power supply design. We had a venable box, kind of like the Omicron, where you can do feedback loop control and all that kind of stuff. Not as nice as Omicron. It was the older, kind of newer stuff. Now, that stuff was supposed to be sent to Venable to be calibrated. But we had a contract with the calibration lab, so they would take it and they would send it to Venable, so it'd go boom, 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 and it took forever to get back because of those contracts. But that's how things are done in the big boys camps, okay? The ones that can afford this expensive equipment, all right? So they don't send them to Tektronix. I've never seen that personally, except for my own personal one where I sent it to Tektronix. So that's kind of a BS thing. Now, the other thing is he mentioned educational market. Hey, they make things for the educational market. Why should we pay higher prices so that they can put money towards development for education? Makes no sense. The other thing, as an educator, when I worked at a college, I didn't want the freaking, Reader's Digest for my students. I wanted them to learn off real equipment that they'd use in a real lab. So if they were going for an interview and they were given that function generator and that oscilloscope, they would be able to find that scope probe and recognize the scope probe for one thing, because I did work. Anyway, there are schools that would give these probes that aren't even scope probes. They're like the one-to-one probes, the BNC to alligator clips, and they call those scope probes. So some educational institutes are ridiculous that they do not teach the students with real equipment. They teach them it's like they're not in high school, guys. You're getting them ready for a job. Teach them with the real equipment. So the educational thing is total BS, okay? There's an instructor, and he can teach you guys how to set it up. It doesn't take that much time. You're in engineering school. To become an engineer, you should be able to learn how to use a freaking scope or a function generator. You don't need this educational BS. So that's horse shit, okay? That's just plain crap. I'm sorry, I'm going to use a little profanity because, yeah, I'm a little worked up. I need a drink. All right, when I taught, I wanted to make I worked at an aerospace company, by the way, with some people from another country that were given to us for free so that we could, the idea was they wanted to learn how we did things. So they're learning how we built power supplies and so on for our fighters, our fighter aircraft, for their countries, so they could take that knowledge and go back and learn that technology. So they came to us and worked for free. And so I had guys with master's degrees back in the day. Today, a lot of people have master's degrees. Back then, it was more rare. It's pretty rare. But from other countries, it was maybe not as rare. Anyway, they would come and I would have them do things for me. I was still in school. So I was promoted to an engineer because the contractor I worked for left, and he was such a respected guy that they really needed him. And when he left a hole, and so they had to make me an engineer even before I graduated. So I had guys with master's degrees that I was sending off to do work. I'm just telling you this stuff because I've been around. I know what I'm talking about. Work in the military industry, designing power supplies. In the space industry, designing power supplies for satellites and such, for Boeing, okay? So I've been around, and the educational thing, when I saw how well those guys were trained, when I taught, I wanted to train our guys better, because some of the guys I worked with, they weren't as good as I thought they should be. And so that was my thing. I didn't want the pre-made lab books where you fill in, set up this op amp, take this measurement, and write it in here. No, I want to take a normal lab book that you'd have as an employee at any company, and I wanted those guys so I'd have them write in the notebook, like, here's the description of this test, here's what we're looking for, here's a problem solution kind of thing. And just had them write in a notebook like you would on the job. I wanted them to learn in school what a company would want them to know when they started working with them. Not to be taught this pre-made stuff on a scope or something that, you know, like held their hand through school, and then when they get a job, they're like, where's my pre-made test, you know, procedures, or where's my pre-made scope setups, or gosh, like, what the heck? Am I gonna have to figure this out on my own? It's ridiculous to have. So the educational thing is crazy. Stop doing it. Stop spending money on it. And all the people that are buying into that market, stop. That's my feeling. Let me know what your guys' comments are. I think it's crazy. Okay. He also brought up industrial components. Well, they use industrial components, so they cost more. That's also bullshit, okay? As a designer, I know that's bullshit. They don't. Most often, they're not using industrial grade parts. Industrial grade parts, what they are is commercial grade parts are good, for instance, at certain temperature ranges. If you buy an LT voltage regulator or a unitrode regulator, you might have 3 temperature grades, okay? One is commercial, industrial, military, okay? They each cost more money, obviously, and they're sometimes it's the same part used in all 3 things, just tested differently. But the thing is these are all commercial parts. They all come with commercial parts in them. If you guys know of a part that's industrial grade that's inside these test equipment, let me know, okay? I'm not saying it's not done. I'm just saying that that's not a reason. That's crazy. In a lab, we're all at room temperature and all that kind of stuff. If you're taking a field oscilloscope, maybe like that Tektronix, then maybe you do. And that's a specialized piece of equipment that's going out in the field. But stuff at the lab, these expensive scopes, the $200,000 scopes, $250,000 scopes, they're not being taken in the field. They're being used on a bench in somebody's lab, okay? So then, yeah, so that's kind of nonsense, all right? He also said made in USA. Oh my hell, supply chain and control exports. Also not true, okay? That's not true. Some of the stuff's made in USA. Even the Tektronix scope that he had in his hands at the time he said that, he admitted that was not made in the United States. I think it was made in Taiwan or something, which is totally fine. I don't have an issue with that. But I'm saying to use to say, you know, to say it was made in USA is reason, that's BS too, okay? That's why things are not made in the USA, so the prices don't cost more. Now, with some of these companies, some of their stuff is made in the USA. Very little of it, okay? Even the scope, like, for instance, it was kind of funny because he's saying reasons why, and he's holding an oscilloscope from Tektronix that's made in Taiwan or somewhere, Malaysia or something. All right, so anyway, supply chain and expert control is part of that you know, kind of melanger, that BS, okay? Supply chain. No, that's not true. We don't care about the supply chain. If I'm buying this thing from them, you know, to put on my bench, I don't care what their supply chain was to buy the parts to put in this. That's up to them to be able to keep on buying parts and stuff. I don't look at their supply chain. I just don't, okay? That is utter nonsense, okay? It doesn't happen. Now, let's say that I'm buying a module, a power supply module that I'm going to put inside my box. It's going on an aircraft. Then that kind of stuff might come into play, and the export control would come into play, okay? If the cost difference, let's say if that was a 10, I don't know what the percentage is, but that's a smaller percentage of the cost of the total thing, it wouldn't even matter. But if it's a good, you know, part of the design, then it would matter, okay? So there's lines that you have to cross before it matters even. That's when it's going inside my product. But test equipment that sits on the bench to test my stuff, no, that stuff doesn't matter. And if you guys know different, leave your comments. Say when you know, because I've never seen it matter, okay? For test equipment, we buy test equipment, and it is up to that company we buy from to make sure that they can keep building these things. I don't care if they can make this 10 years from now. I just want this one today. I'm not, in 10 years, I hope to buy something better. If I'm still buying this part in 10 years, shame on me. I'm an idiot. Because there's going to be way better stuff in 10 years. So that's BS. Okay, guys. So is this a little bit more of a rant that you want? Oh. After my rant on the multimeters, some of the stuff I heard the arguments people did, and Pat and Dave on the back saying, "Oh yeah, you're so right about that." None of these people, they just don't know what they're talking about. They just want to believe. They want to buy in on that nonsense. Oh yeah, that's why I paid $700 for the, in my humble opinion, the worst multimeter you can buy. You know, it's ridiculous. You want to feel good about blowing your money on expensive stuff, then do whatever you have to do. But in this video, I want to call nonsense on that stuff. So when you guys leave your comments about, oh yeah, he's right about the calibration, and they have a calibration lab on site, and they can do their own I don't care. I don't send my stuff to them anyway. Okay? When I had a small company here in Salt Lake years ago, a Fluke guy came in and wanted to sell me a calibration instrument where I could put different modules in it. And I was trying to look for something that kind of looked like it, but I put different modules depending on what Fluke multimeter series. He said I could make a ton of money doing that. And I wasn't interested. I was stupid. I should have done it because I could have made a lot of money, like he said. But I was trying to focus on design. I had a kind of a two-part of my business, and the one part I fought against doing, I should have just done because I could have made a lot of money. But I wanted to build up the contracting side of my business. And anyway, so that's how easy it is to get business calibrating Fluke multimeters. Is you get this piece of equipment, you have these modules, and today it's probably even simpler. That was 25 years ago. So yeah, things have changed a lot, guys. Back in the day when oscilloscopes were this deep on your bench because they had a CRT that was that long for a screen that big, well, yeah, that big. I mean, that tube was a piece of art. Tektronix and Hewlett-Packard were kings at that. And Tektronix triggering was known to be one of the best. So back in the day, that was a huge expense of the oscilloscope. Now that they have LCD displays, you know, they're cheap. What was it, 20 years ago maybe, when big flat screens came out? It cost 20 grand to get a 40-inch screen TV. My sister married to a surgeon, a very good surgeon. They were rebuilding the kitchen. They wanted to put, they spend most of their time there. They wanted to put this big flat screen TV, plasma screen back in the day, 20 grand for, I think it was 40 inches. Maybe it was 36 inches. Nowadays, you can get those for what, 400 bucks? But why do oscilloscopes that cost that price range back then still cost that same price range today? That flat screen TV arguably has higher technology in it than say a $20,000 scope does today. Okay, where you buy a $400 flat screen TV versus $20,000 oscilloscope. People say, well, that's because they don't sell this many. Well, but over the years, as prices dropped in the components, that CRT, now it's a very inexpensive LCD screen. Also, all those cards of electronics that were in those oscilloscopes, they're big and heavy, 30, 40 pounds. All that stuff now is in a very lightweight scope. Why? Because it's in a big old FPGA chip, or probably an ASIC. So if you're going to sell, and they do sell enough of them, because they'll make an ASIC chip and it'll go in a whole line, maybe 2 lines of scopes, and even Dave's talked about that. Well, after, your return on your investment over 2 or 3 years, that price is going down, 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 right? In the old days, when you had to build, every time you build a scope, you'd have to build all those circuit cards, put them in, the thing, and there's a lot of hand assembly. Well, nowadays, there's a lot less hand assembly. It's mostly machine. There's one circuit board, maybe 2 circuit boards in there, and the component count has gone down drastically. About the same scale. As the component count's gone down, the memory has gone up. Oh, sorry, unless you're buying a $10,000 scope, the memory they put in their scopes, say they're $4,000 or $2,000 scopes, they don't put very much memory in them. Why? Because it would kill the sales of the $10,000 or $20,000 scopes. It'd kill them. So they have to basically penalize their lower models. So this Micsig down here kicks butt. That Tektronix scope that he was showing, this Micsig for what, $500-$600, kicks butt. That scope. So I was actually gonna pay my own money to buy one of those Tektronix scopes, just to have one on the lab bench to show people, to show you guys. Just like I bought these Fluke meters, just to have here on the bench to show you. But God, and I thought the price isn't too bad. Like, forget what it was, $1,800 or something like that. But then I go, oh, but wow, that comes bare bones. That's like, if you want the, the bus encoding, that was like, I forget, $500 or $600. I kind of forget the prices. Excuse me. Yeah, I kind of forget the prices, but it was like, if I want, like, every add-on I wanted on the scope, all the functionality, it comes bare bones. And when you see option next to all the features, and one thing I loved, and I'd like to show you guys the brochure that Tektronix has, or a Keysight maybe. They compare they have a Keysight, Tektronix, and I think a GW Instek, maybe a Rigol scope. And they show why their scopes stand up or stack up better than those. But when you see how they stack up the things and they go option, 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 you're like, wait, hold it. You can't stack it up saying and quoting the same prices, like say $1,700 compared to say the other scopes like $900. Hey, yeah, we cost more, but look how well we stack up. You can't do that when all those other features ends up making that. All right, guys, I had to change my memory card there. So yeah, you can't. When they do that comparison and they say options, you have to go. And the thing is, you have to send in a thing to try to get the price of the options, and you have to fill in some information and all that kind of stuff. And I got it, but anyway, now I'm kind of going by memory. But it practically doubled the price of the scope when you add the bandwidth of the scope, you add the, digital encoding, and God, there's just all these things you have to add to get the same thing as they're comparing it to. It's like, wait, that's not fair. If you do it that way, you have to show the price that you're comparing. Okay, now we're comparing $3,400 to $900 scope. There's no comparison, right? It's like, why are we comparing these two things? Anyway, so okay. Let me just run through some of these things you said, because I'm taking a lot of time. App support. Hogwash. Just hogwash. Micsig, GW Instek, Pico. Pico's awesome. Any of these scope companies I reach out and send an email to, I get an email message right back like the next day. Just like I do, Tektronix or anybody else. Sometimes it takes a day or two from these bigger companies, but these these guys, seems like within a day I get a message back. So and Pico's like awesome. They have tons of data on their website. So yeah, the app support, and plus the apps. There is a lot more apps in my opinion with these other, like Micsig is awesome. Okay, so yeah, that's rubbish. Construction quality and consistency. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, so when I was working for military stuff, okay, and I went to DirecTV, I was thinking like I'm leaving Boeing to go work. I was working on an International Space Station where I got an Engineering Excellence Award, which is a big deal, you know, in engineering, especially in military stuff at Boeing. Anyway, I went from that to DirecTV, and I thought, man, I'm going from like working on, you know, a space station which I spent a whole year testing, where I'm going to go to DirecTV, and within, you know, I forget what it was, in less than a year, I'm going to design 2 power supplies for these things for the next generation. Okay, and the pressure I felt at DirecTV was much higher because I knew that the first week they're going to make 88,000 of those boards. That's a lot of pressure. If you made a mistake, you're like, oh man, 88,000 we gotta fix, you know. And military stuff, things move slower, and you have time to correct and adjust and bring in, you know, prototypes and make sure everything's good. Okay, so yeah, when you're making things that you're going to sell lots of, you have to have it right. If you don't, you're going to get a lot of returns. The returns will kill you. Okay, so that's not true. Okay, the construction quality, like the tear down this meter here, for instance, it's a lot cheaper than say an Agilent, right? But I mean, no, I can't imagine making it better. Let me just say that. So, yeah, that's again rubbish. Longevity of production. Ah, golly, ollie, holy shit! If Fluke makes a multimeter for 20 years, and we're talking oscilloscopes now, you can't do that with the oscilloscopes. The same company that owns Fluke owns Tektronix. What scope have they been making for 20 years, like the Fluke 87? None. Zero. Because technology changes too damn fast. We don't care. And this whole BS about writing in, oh, use this scope for this test, and the military requires that because that product that's bullshit. I've written those test things. Anybody that's written in a certain brand of or model of equipment to test that, it will say that or equivalent. Do you think the military is going to put themselves at risk that they depend on that company to provide that instrument, or they can't test their gear? Oh my God, we can't send the F-15 up because Fluke stopped selling the 87. That's bullshit. The people that buy into that are just buying into a story because they want to believe it. They want to support those companies. They want to believe in their own money that they spend on this rubbish, which it is. In my humble opinion, it's a rant. I can say what I want. So, okay, that's bullshit. Some countries, they call this a strong beer. I need it. Calibration service. I think we've covered that. That's 100% rubbish, or we can say rubbish / bullshit. Once and for all, let's call that rubbish / bullshit. Whenever anybody brings up, hey, we have a calibration lab, I just don't care. I'll send it to my own calibration lab. And guess what? Calibration labs are not cheap because they got you by the shorties, okay? If you're doing military type stuff, if you're doing things, now if you're not, oh, and by the way, I've worked in military labs that don't have everything calibrated. And by the way, that's fairly common, actually. Let's say a power supply, for instance. Let's say this guy, that voltage or current on the front. I don't have to get this power supply calibrated. Okay? I just don't. You know why? Because I'll have my cheaper multimeter calibrated, and I'll put a multimeter right here, and I'll read the voltage off the multimeter when I'm doing my testing. So the reason calibration's done, it's not a tuning, by the way. Not like it used to be where you'd dial in and get the thing working. Calibration is a way to make sure your equipment is working properly. because things just don't drift like they used to. So yeah, that frustrates me because I hear that so much, and people, you know, Dave said that on the multimeter video, just people buy into that stuff, and it's bullshit. It's just total 100% bullshit. Measurement confidence. Really? I think earlier he said that, hey, it's not because there's a difference in the tolerance or the measurement accuracy. It's because of all these other reasons. But then he threw that in there just to kind of squeeze it in and make it sound like it meant something. Yeah. You know, people that have this belief system, they're going to believe that they have better confidence because they're using their expensive thing that they're using. I have total trust in anything here on the bench, okay? And you know what? If you don't, you can back it up with a second instrument. If it's that important, and whenever you take a measurement, if it doesn't seem right, you should get a backup to make sure, okay? So that's BS too. Approved vendors. So this is kind of where the real reason falls in. And he kind of squeezed it into the middle towards the end of his rant, or, well, his discussion, his, to try to explain in a rational way why things cost so much. Not my rant of where I'm calling BS and blah, blah, blah. You know, like he's trying to make it sound reasonable and rational. So near about 2/3 through, he kind of throws in the real reason. Approved vendors, the de facto standard and brand solution, okay? Brand recognition kind of thing. That's the true reason. Everybody knows Fluke's been around forever. I was always in their camp too. I totally believed in them. And you get a Fluke, you don't question it. You should, but you don't, okay? So, if it's calibrated, you go, yeah, it's good. But that's so true with so many different instruments. It's just laziness. I have to admit that I was complacent. I just believed in that stuff for so many years. So until I started doing this channel and seeing what the market actually had and all the good companies that are out there doing really good quality work, like this, this power supply and this Matrix LCR meter. There's just so much quality products out there for such a more reasonable price. But that's the real reason. It's approved. Somebody 15 years ago wrote they went out and they got 3 or 4 vendors to compete, and they came up with the price, cost, and they rationalized, and they showed everybody, and everybody got it approved. And then after that, they became lazy and complacent. In my humble opinion, that's why these companies have been able to sit on their, on their name, even after they've been sold off several times to different companies. They keep their name and their model number. In my humble opinion, the Fluke 87, the Fluke 189, even Fluke when it came out said this scope or this multimeter has, like, I forget what they said, like 8 functions that are better, 8 parameters that are better, or 8, additional things. And they killed off that meter because they don't want to kill the 87 because it had been approved, just like this thing says, approved vendors. So you can, if you work for one of these companies, you can say, I need 10 more meters this year, 100 more meters for my different, my 10 labs or something, and you could buy those 100 meters, at some exorbitant price, and it would be checked off without a doubt, with no question. That's the true reason I believe that these companies can still get away with this BS. And so that's why I want to do this video. So I want to change that, because as taxpayers, we shouldn't be putting up with that BS. We should be challenging these purchasers to go out there and have to compete things every freaking year. So they can't just, by laziness and by complacent engineers like myself working in the field going, hey, I want a new tech, thinking Tektronix is still the best. And, you shouldn't be able to do that, okay? So, all right, let's move on. Accessories. Oh, golly. I have so many nice differential scope probes from Micsig. Micsig's been killing it in that arena. I've got a bunch of differential probes that are like $200. They're like, I think 4x minimum from Tektronix. That has no reason. It used to, one thing that frustrated me is every time I'd go to another series of a Tektronix scope, they would have another type of specialized probe I had to use, you know, and it was like their, you know, own intellectual property type of scope probe, where it used to be just simple BNC scopes. Everybody had that. Well, they got smart and they realized, hey, if we put these extra pins for power and stuff, you know. Now, Micsig did it on this one, but I can use, well, I don't have it right here real handy, but they put pins on their scope to make their modules a little smaller, which Tech still didn't do, at least the ones I saw. But the Micsig one comes with a little adapter so you can use with a basic scope with the BNC, and you plug a USB-C for power. So you can still use it with other scopes. These other companies, like all of them, you know, Siglent and, well, sorry, not Siglent, it's Keysight now, was Hewlett-Packard. Anyway, Keysight, Tektronix, and LaCroix, you know, they have specialized probes, right? So you have to buy their things. So the accessories are ridiculously priced. Oh my heck, you can buy a scope for the prices of some of their accessories. That's reason not to buy them. And pioneers of high-end solutions. Well, they were pioneers at one time. And, you know, when we go back to multimeters, has Fluke pioneered anything new in multimeters? I mean, it's a joke, right? I mean, these guys put Bluetooth in their meters where you have free apps that you can download. You don't have to subscribe and pay a penalty every month to use them. Yeah, you know, outside of these big companies, you have a lot more pioneering going on, in my humble opinion. Now, when you get to the really expensive high-end stuff, like 20 gigahertz, 30 gigahertz, well, if you look at Pico, okay, here, let me just jump over here to Pico real fast. Pico has a 16 gigahertz scope that starts around 18,000. Okay, so the Tektronix is like 32,000, and they're both around 30,000, the other scopes, compared to the Pico at 18,000. So, you know, they're a third the cost higher, and the Pico, in my humble opinion, is better scope. Okay. Anyway, I mean, this is just my little rant, my little humble opinion here. I'm just throwing out my thoughts and that you guys, you know, rummage through them. There's a bunch of small things he said, which there's so many, when you compare them to other companies, there's so many small things the other companies have that they don't have. So, consistency of interface. Oh, jeez. Seriously. I've used a lot of really expensive oscilloscopes, and every time I go to another family, the interface has changed. Like I just said, you have to buy new probes. You have to spend another, you know, 10 grand. Say you buy a $27,000 scope, you have to buy 10 grand in probes to replace the current and the voltage probes you used to have with the other one. You can't use anymore, and so the interface. Okay, let me tell you a story. I forget which series of Tektronix scope it is now. It's one of the recent ones they came out with about 3 or 4 years ago. I was trying to look. I was trying to look for the model number. Anyway, I think it's like the 4000 series. It was like a $27,000 scope, okay? High bandwidth, all this cool stuff. The big old screen, was it 10 or 12-inch screen? It's like a 12-inch screen. It's a big old scope. It's like the one Dave has, but I think it was the more expensive line of the one that he showed, okay? So they came out with it, and the menus were the text was so small, I'm like having to put my face over it. I'm like, God, my eyes aren't, I can read my notebook from this distance away, okay? I couldn't read I can look at these screens and I can read that text on that GW Instek from here. I couldn't read their stuff. I'm like, so the guy came in, a Tektronix rep came in with the local, sales rep, and I said, look, dude, I am sorry, but if I bought a car for 27 grand and if when I'm driving it, the speedometer is so small that I had to put my face up that close to read it, I'd be pissed, that you did that. Like, I have this big old dashboard. It's all clean now. You've cleaned it all up. Gave me this huge display, less knobs. But now I can't read anything. It's so small. And they're kind of like laughing because I'm an older guy. Like, oh, yeah, eyesight, right? And I'm like, and then there's all these menu-driven things. If I click on a thing, it pops up. Why doesn't it expand and give me all the options easy to read versus popping up the menu and then driving through more menus, with small text? I can't say, why doesn't it pull up with all the options just right there, or maybe one more layer instead of like several layers? And they're kind of laughing. I'm like, another problem I have, I go, the deep memory. These scopes have deep memory. I can change my horizontal rate so I can capture so much time of data, and I want to, and it'll automatically set the deep memory with the time of data I'm trying to capture and my sampling rate. So those three things, it'll automatically do all those things for me. But it also has a manual mode where if I go, hey, I want to capture all this stuff, or I want to capture less, but I really want to use all that deep memory and use a lot of samples to really dig into that. But I can't, because when I go in manual mode and I change one, it'll let me fix one of those three things, but it'll change the second one with me. I'm like, that's doing opposite of what I want to do though. In manual, I should be able to change all three, any one of those three parameters independently. They'll go, yeah, you can. I'm like, no, I can't. Show me. And so they went to show me, and they walked up to the bench, and I was telling the guy, like me, I work with another guy a lot of times at the bench, and we're both looking, and each one of us has to put our face to the other guy. He's a younger guy than me, and they're like, oh, like an eyesight thing. And then they said, and I was also busting their balls on. I was like, sorry to be pissed, but if this was my own money, I'd be pissed, right? It's not his company's money, but if it was my own, I spend this much money, I want to know why. Why have you guys gone, forward on the side of the screen, but backwards in your text and your menus? Like, why is that? And they said, well, and then we talked about this auto versus manual thing, and the guy goes up and he goes, here, let me show you. And he goes up and he puts his face up like that so he can read it. And I laughed at him. I go, you just proved my first point. You can't read it either. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. It is kind of small. I'm like, yeah, it's ridiculous. And I go, by the way, before we got this scope, I looked at your literature because I do a ton of research. And I go, this thing said that it won some kind of GUI interface, award. Like it won some engineering award for the best GUI interface. Like what what Dave's trying to say, the interface, and what he's saying, consistency and the user interface, and it was terrible. I'm like, how'd you? And they couldn't tell me where the award came from, because I said I didn't see where the award came from. Like, who gave that award? You just claimed that. Like, where'd it come from? Because I want to know who those boneheads are that gave you that award. And he couldn't tell me. Maybe somebody did give him an award, or maybe they awarded themselves. I don't know. But he we had a laugh about it, and they couldn't tell either. To their benefit, a few months later, 3 or 4 months later, they came back and said, hey, we got a firmware update. And they did the firmware update. The text was a little bit bigger. It was reasonable, but it's too bad that it wasn't adjustable where you have like several different levels, but it was bigger. It was much better, much better. The other thing is they made that manual mode actually work. So they fixed those two things. So kudos to them, but it should have worked in the first place. It was terrible. Okay. Anyway, so The other thing that came up during that is when they came in, another reason I was so kind of fired up and ticked off at them, we had a really important project come through and there's a failure, okay? And what would happen is it powered up and something happened. It causes a transient and it shut things down. It seemed like it damaged things and we're like, oh, geez. So it was brought to our lab. We hooked up the scope, triggered it, set it all up to, you know, capture 3 or 4 signals, whatever. I think we had 8 channels on this scope. Anyway, we hooked up a bunch of things and we're like, okay, let's hit the on button. We're going to hit on and then off real quick and hopefully we capture it so we don't further damage this product, okay? So we did it and we saw the trigger, the scope trigger, and we turned it back off real quick before, you know, sometimes when something's damaged, when you have more current, more voltage, more current go through it, it further damages it where pretty soon it's just destroyed, right? But we were trying to save, you know, what we had so we could kind of troubleshoot and find root cause. And we captured it. We're like, oh, so we're dialing in, kind of zooming in on it. And all of a sudden, what just happened? It rebooted. The freaking oscilloscope rebooted. So, or it froze and then we had to reboot it, I think is what happened. Anyway, we were just like, oh no. So we're like, what happened? Well, we changed our controls a little bit, so this time we wouldn't have to touch anything. And we tried it again, powered on, powered off. Great, we captured the signal again. Oh, we're so relieved. So it still worked well enough that we still captured the transient. We're like, okay, good. But we just didn't want to, you know, damage the board where it wouldn't react the same and we couldn't get the information. And we almost lost it because of this stupid oscilloscope. So I was telling them this story when they came in the first time, and they said, oh, it's probably your hard drive. I'm like, well, because it has Windows on it? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, okay, so what do we do? And they said, well, just take it out. If you don't need it, take it out, and it shouldn't crash on you. And I'd read something earlier. I said, I was kind of surprised you still had a Windows-based hard drive in here, because I thought you guys had jumped on board with Windows. A lot of people hated that, and you're getting rid of it. And they go, yeah, the hard drive's still kind of left over. And so I said, well, what are we losing functionality? Are we losing the memory, all the stuff we can store? Because this thing has super deep memory. And they're like, no, nothing. And I'm like, well, what's it for then? They're like, well, it's for all the Windows-based stuff, you know, Excel, Word, and stuff like that, so you can run that stuff. I go, so we can use our $27,000 scope like a freaking laptop. I'm like, are you serious? We spent $1,000 extra. We could have spent 26 grand. So the $1,000 for the hard drive that has Windows that makes it crash. First of all, if there's any possibility that it can make an oscilloscope crash, it should be ditched. It should be dumped. It should be told to the customer that that's a possibility, because there are times when you're dealing with this expensive equipment, you're dealing with the expensive stuff you're testing, you know, maybe $1 million products, and you can't afford this BS to happen, okay? So consistency of interface, oh, if it were only true. More polished firmware. Well, I think we just covered that. That's bullshit. Okay? App, software, yeah. So anyway, his list is just bullshit, guys. There is no reason it should cost that much. Those $27,000 scopes, they should probably cost $8,000, in my humble opinion. You know, they should cost a fraction. When you can get a scope like the Micsig for, you know, under $1,000 easy, and it has awesome options, and the probes, the differential and current probes are like around a couple $100. You shouldn't be spending more than, say, $2,000 for a really nice scope. Now, if you want to go higher end, you can buy the PicoScopes. Okay, you can buy, for instance, you could buy, all right, guys, I had to pull out some, oh, an oscilloscope that small? So 5,000 series. Here's the 2,000 series. 4-channel generator built in. awesome price. I have a review on this. I'll put it up. That competes with like the Micsig. Kind of kicks Micsig's butt, but Micsig's still a great scope. But the PicoScope 5000, 4-channel. You got all your logic stuff. I mean, this is fully loaded. It has your generator built in. So guys, this thing here, fully loaded and everything the way I have it right here is the 5444D. This is the 5444D MSO, they call it, because it has the digital stuff. $3,600, okay? Comes with all the probes and everything. Comes with the logic probes. Comes with everything, okay? So $3,600. That's from Pico. The software on this is amazing. Talking about GUI, the software on this thing is far better than you're going to find on a bench scope. Really any bench scope, in my humble opinion, okay? So also this thing is not just an 8-bit but up to 16-bit scope. Plus, it's not only 1 gigasample per second, but you can go up to 10 gigasamples per second. So, I mean, there's just, I'm not, doing a big scope review, but I'm just saying this thing's super powerful for $3,600, fully loaded. So under $5,000, you can get a fantastic scope. Okay, 200 megahertz, by the way. So, and super deep memory. So there are cases with video stuff. There are engineers that work in super fast, circuits. Okay, like when they're doing video processing. That's one I know about. And the guys that one company I worked at, they had a $250,000 scope. I think it's from Tektronix to do that kind of work. Now, I still can't believe a scope should cost that much. I mean, I would think 10 or 15, 20,000 at the most, not 200,000. But anyway, so as far as pioneering and stuff, yeah, when you get to the extremely crazy low-level signal stuff where you're, the Pico has a lot of that stuff, but yeah, so that's where the prices might get higher. And I think when you look at the scale of the prices of Pico, it's much more reasonable. And I think the other companies should drop down to that price range. But, and even that, if they did, then I think Pico would say, well, we can compete. We can drop ours even lower. I'll bet they could. Anyway, I'm just saying that there's no reason scopes cost that much. Now here, let me just say something about Dave's rant, okay? Here's what was kind of funny. As a few months later, 9 months later, by the way, okay, so it was about 9 months later, he did another video on his EEV Blog 2 channel, his other channel, and he interviewed Andy, I think it was Andy Ted. I'm not sure. I can't read my writing here, but I'm sorry, butchered his name. But he interviewed a guy from Tektronix, and it turns out that that's the guy who brought him that oscilloscope. So gave him that oscilloscope. So he's probably thinking like, okay, I've got this expensive scope. How do I how do I show it on my channel? Other than being a one-off thing, like how do I show it as something that's potentially useful, that's potentially worth the price tag? So I have to do this video why scopes cost so much, and I have to come up with this list of bullshit. Alright guys, sorry, memory card ran out again. Sorry this is such a long video. I just want to cover a bunch of things that will come up in the comment section, trying to kill them before they hit there. Maybe I'll create a bigger conversation, which would be cool. So, yeah, so Dave did that interview with Andy on the scope. That one didn't get near as many views because, I don't know why. Probably because it's on a second channel maybe. But anyway, it got like, I think it's like 22,000 views, something like that, versus 100,000 views from his why scopes should cost so much. It's funny how people want to believe in that or something. I don't get it. It's kind of like the same thing with the multimeter thing. So, but then, he did a review not that long ago on the Rigol, the new 12-bit vertical resolution. It's closer to like what the Pico can do. or like the GW Instek, or even an O1, you know. So Rigol's come up with something that was pretty low cost. I gotta hand it to him, because Siglent came out with the low-cost scope to compete with their low-cost scope, but then they went to these expensive scopes. So Siglent's trying to make themselves like a Tektronix or something, where Rigol has come back and said, hey, we're going to offer a lot of performance in low-cost scopes. And, you know, you come entry-level because of the cost, not because of their performance, right? So, and he gave rave reviews on that, and that's got 85,000 views. So, you know, these people like Rigol, they were going to get, the guy, I contacted Rigol one time, wanted to do a review, see if I could get a loaner. They're going to send me a scope, and then they never did. And now they don't respond to me. So, you know, Dave, they'll give him scopes, and he gets scopes from Keysight and all these guys, like when he found 10 in the garbage can, you know, that he gave away. I mean, they have all these cool things they do with him. So, yeah, of course he's going to support them and their prices and stuff. In my humble opinion, that's what's happening. With me, I don't have that. I just have a beer and a small lab, a small channel, and I don't have any ties with those guys. Pico sends me things, and they're awesome, and their prices are great. So I also reviewed Micsig, the GW, well, I did the Siglent once, and yeah, I do other things too. They're lower cost. So, but I'm not going to defend scopes that cost 10 grand or more. That's just, I don't see it unless it's because they're super fast scopes, like super high-end scopes. But 200 meg scopes, no. 200 meg scopes shouldn't cost more than 5 grand, you know, or something like that. Unless there's something super great about them, something super different. But, you know, with the technology, now that we can do so much on an ASIC and an LCD display, the hardware itself is been changed from lots of circuits down to an ASIC and very little circuitry. There's no reason. Sure, you got to get your money back from the software and the firmware design development into that ASIC. Now the front end of the scopes, which is what Pico does, they concentrate on the front end of the scope, because the processing unit, the drivers and all that stuff for the video, all the video processing, you do that on your scope. So you've already got you do that stuff on your laptop because you already have a computer, right? So they focus on the front end, this part right here where the signals come in, to keep that signal integrity very low. So you have isolation from AC voltages and that. You get very low noise. That's how they can do higher bits than just 8 bits. You know, they can go up to 16 bits or 14 bits. I have the 4000 series that looks just like that one. Where's that one? And it has 4 differential channels, very unique scope, and it's 14-bit scope. Very cool scope. So, and it's priced about the same as this one. But this one's maybe a little bit more universal use. Anyway, yeah, those kind of things I can get behind. You know, I can see some test equipment, like Omicron, being 6 grand, where that's very specialized, you know. But these ridiculously expensive scopes that Dave, you know, he gets given to him, so he wants to defend why they can cost as much money as they do. Yeah, I can't get behind that. So I just had to rant. And guys, you can buy me a beer, a cup of coffee. You want to see a rant on a certain subject, you know, buy me, there's a super thank you down there. You can always buy me a beer, cup of coffee, whatever. And yeah, it's a way to, you know, kind of one-time donation. You can also become a patron, which 2 thumbs up to my patrons. Appreciate you guys. And you can join the channel if you want as well. I'm going to try to do more videos, try to get more videos out quicker. And this year's been a crazy year. Man, it's been a crazy year. But yeah, it's going to finish off well. And yeah, we're having good times now. I've got some nice equipment. And yeah, this was given to me free. This, you know, all this stuff right here, I can see, was given to me for free. So I'm kind of lucky. Not as lucky as Dave on that kind of stuff, but then at the same time, I don't have to, you know, these guys, they send me stuff. I never hear from them. They never ask me to say anything or anything like that. I don't feel obliged to. I don't have a YouTube channel that that they advertise on or anything like that, so I don't have to, you know, try to make them happy with me so I can get a channel. So yeah, maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot, and they'll never support me, but I hope you guys do. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.